U.S. is almost certainly in a recession. We had the first 2 quarters of 2022 negative GDP growth, 2 quarters in a row. That's the rule of thumb definition of a recession. I understand that the decision is made by the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a panel of, I think, 9, kind of PhD level economists. They haven't said anything yet, so that allows people like Janet Yellen to say, well, there's no recession because the NBER hasn't said so. But in fact, they never do. They often take 9 months or a year sometimes to say, oh, the recession started way back when, like maybe by late this year, December, January, they'll say, oh, a recession started in January, 2022. Well, thank you very much. We knew that at the time, but you're taking your time to make up your mind. Third quarter, jury's out. Third quarter's over. The data's not in. You kind of get mixed messages on that. We'll see. We'll know at the end of October. But even if the third quarter is slightly positive, which it may be, you're still sort of flattish for the year. So put aside the debate about whether there's technically a recession or not. To get 3 quarters into the year with about zero growth, 2 quarters down, maybe 1 quarter up slightly, we don't know yet, but you're kind of close to zero in the world's largest economy. That's not good, but that's not what's coming. What's coming is a very severe recession, and whether when all is said and done, the umpires, the National Bureau of Economic Research says, well, you had, first half wasn't really a recession, but now it is, or you had a double dip recession or whatever. They can call it what they want, but you can see what's coming. Monetary tightening on top of a world where growth is deaccelerating, inventories are sky high. The funny thing about the supply chain is, you go back a year or so, kind of this time last year, we all remember headline, supply chain's broken down, Junior's cheesecake can't get cream cheese, they can't make cheesecakes, or the shelves are bare. So all true, that was happening at the time, and that's when I started working on the book. But what a lot of purchasing managers did, and inventory managers, they doubled their orders. They said, well, or tripled the orders. They said, well, if the supply chain's breaking down and I want just a normal amount, I better order 3 times as much or twice as much just to get what I want. And they did. Well, what happened was, by the summer, some of that pressure had been alleviated, and here come the shipments into the warehouses that are twice as much or 3 times as much as what you needed at the exact same time that the Fed was destroying demand. And so demand drops off a cliff, retail sales drop off a cliff, the warehouses go from being empty to being full to the rafters, and now all that merchandise is sitting there. We've heard this from, Target, I think, was the first one to sound the alarm, but a lot of other, distributors, Dollar General and other stores have said the same thing. So what do you do when you're in charge of inventory? You cut prices. You don't want that inventory. It costs a lot of money to keep it in the warehouses, number one. Number two, a lot of it's seasonal. It's like, who wants to buy, summer dress in December? Not too many people. So they just slash prices. So and that reduces margins and reduces profits. So we're just kind of flying into the face of all that, with the Fed tightening rates into weakness. The Fed will be the last to know, because they're very model driven and the models are badly flawed, mostly with the Phillips curve, and they're focused on the unemployment rate, which is not a good measure of what's going on in the labor force. So we're flying into a really bad recession. The stock market's starting to get the message, but you've got this pivot narrative. You can't quite get rid of some of the buy the dips people are still around. So count on them to, buy into what could be a horrendous bear market. You got your buy and hold crowd. Remember in 2000, 2001, the NASDAQ dropped 80%. And a lot of people got out, but they said, well, just hold on to it. Well, it did come back, but it took until 2015. That's a long time. A lot of people died in the meantime. You're waiting 14 years to get back to where you were. So those people are still around, but there is what I call the pivot crowd. So the Fed pivot is a narrative, and it kind of goes like this. Yeah, the Fed's tightening. We see that, but inflation's going to come down really fast. The economy is going to slow down really fast. Both of those things are happening. Inflation, a little less so, but the economic slowdown is there. And the Fed's going to get the wake-up call and have to cut rates. And cutting rates, that's the pivot. They're going to pivot from rate hikes to rate cuts. And that's good for tech stocks, so buy stocks. Now, that's the narrative. prevailed in late July and most of August. The stock market did go up. There was a decent rally in the middle of what's become a bear market, based on this Fed narrative that they were going to have to cut rates maybe in December, early January, etc. There are two huge fallacies in that narrative. The first one is, who says the Fed's going to get the message? And if you look at what Jay Powell said in Jackson Hole on August 26th and what he repeated in his Washington press conference on September 21st. September 21st was like, hey, for any of you who weren't listening to Jackson Hole, let me repeat it, okay? We're going to raise rates. We're going to crush inflation. We know there's a recession. He didn't put it in quite so many words, but you don't have to be, you don't need a decoder ring to see what Jay Powell was saying. I've been following this for 50 years. I've never seen a Fed chairman use the word pain 3 times in one paragraph, but he did. He knows there's going to be a recession. They're causing it in part. Unemployment's going to go up. He said that. And really September more than August, he tied unemployment to killing, basically demand destruction and getting inflation under control. He said, that's how we're going to do it. And you're already starting to see some early signs of that. So with that as their focus, who says the Fed's going to, get a wake-up call in December, January? Almost certainly not. I mean, they told us what they're going to do. They're going to raise rates in November. They're going to raise them again in December. They're going to raise them again on February 1st. That's the first meeting in the 2023 calendar. And then he said, if we see progress on inflation, we'll pause. But pause doesn't mean cut. It means just wait a long time, because at that point, core PCE, that's personal consumption expenditure, core, which excludes oil and food, and that's just how they do it. That's their favorite metric. You can debate whether it's the best one, but the debate doesn't matter because that is the one they use. Let's say that comes down from about 6.5, where it is now, to around 3.5. Okay, it's still not 2. So what Powell said is, we don't have to keep raising rates to force it to 2. We just have to raise them enough that it'll get to 2 on its own. That's what they call a restrictive policy. So, but that's not a rate cut. He said that might last for a year, all the way into 2024. That's when he was talking about rate cuts. The stock market, again, so the August rally was based on the pivot narrative I just described. The September collapse was based on people saying, well, I just said, which is, hey, that narrative doesn't really make sense. The Fed's not going to cut rates. Then, of course, the sledgehammer on September 21st. And so, this is the beginning of October. Yeah, there was a rally, a 2-day rally. Bear market rallies are really interesting. Some of the biggest rallies in history have been in the middle of bear markets, where you ended up losing everything. But for a couple of days or weeks even, it's, hey, the bottom's in, buy stocks, etc. So you have to watch out for that. So my expectation is the recession's coming. It's going to be really bad. Inflation is going to come down fast, but not quite fast enough for the Fed. They're going to keep raising rates into early 2023, destroying demand, raising unemployment. And we're going to wake up this winter, although you can see it coming today, we're going to wake up this winter with a severe recession, high unemployment, and a much lower stock market.